my name is Antonia Husberg. I work as a ministerial advisor at the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry of Finland. I mainly work with national rural policy questions, and I work as the acting Secretary General of the National Rural Policy Council. And today I will be sharing with you some experiences on the development and use of the rural proofing method in Finland. I will not go into details about the rural policy in Finland or the duties and the work of the Rural Policy Council. My main focus is on the rural proofing method as developed and used in the Finnish context. So first, let's have a quick look at Finland. At the left, you can see the urban-rural classification, and it visualizes the urban-rural continuum or the ruralities of Finland. Now, this map, it's based on geographical information, and the source data include data on population, labor, commute, land use, buildings, roads, etc. So this gives a perspective on what kind of country Finland is, and as you can see, it is very rural. Now, as also in Finland, there has been a concentration of the population to urban areas, and with several national reorganizing reforms on the reorganizing of local and regional governments, there has been a need for rural proofing of policies and also of these reforms. So that's a quick look, and now let's take a brief look at a timeline, the development of rural proofing in Finland. And as I mentioned, there has been several national reforms, and these started about 15 years ago. And this is at the same point where rural proofing development started in Finland, inspired by international examples. And it was within the National Rural Policy, and the first rural policy thematic group was started its work in 2007. And after that, there has been several developmental steps, pilots, broad cooperations, research and development projects financed by the Rural Policy Council. The cooperation with the Association of Finnish Municipalities has been very important in the development of the Finnish method. And at the moment, we have an interministerial working group working to develop the guidelines for rural proofing of government legislative proposals. This is new and a further step in the development. And so finally, we will have rural proofing in the guidance on the impact assessment of government legislative proposals, which is being currently renewed. But so it has been a long developmental road. There has been trials and errors and a lot of cooperation, different pilots, and it has given a broad perspective on how it can be used and what works and what not. But rural policy has been very important in the development of the method. And also, what I would like to say now is, like, from the start, from 2007, 2009, there has been pronounced political support and a will for rural proofing. But at the same time, politicians have underlined that rural proofing must be voluntary. So there is no legislation that makes rural proofing of legislative drafts obligatory. And even though rural proofing will be a part of the guidance on the impact assessment of government legislative proposals, it will still be voluntary. And now look at the method in itself. Now, the Finnish method is based on a checklist. This is where rural proofing starts in Finland. And the checklist includes topics on housing, services, infrastructure, livelihoods, entrepreneurship, competence, democracy, and also rural attractiveness. So usually the rural proofing process starts with this checklist, and once the answer is given to the question, does the proposal have impacts on, and these different themes, if there is if the answer is yes, then a more thorough process starts with follow-up questions and with participative workshops using data and questionnaires. But the checklist is where the rural proofing starts in Finland. Now, as I said, with the national reforms on the local government reorganization, regional government reorganization, the method has been mainly used and developed at the municipal and regional level. And it's important to note that there are differences in the implementation and use on the regional and municipal level and on the national level as regard to who does the rural proofing and how large a scope the process is. So here is a list with the checklist questions, and I'm not going to go into these, but you will have a possibility to review these later on. So if the answer is yes, a more thorough impact assessment should be carried out. And here are also some of the basic elements within the Finnish method: initiative, introduction, linking to ongoing processes, selecting themes, communication and documentation. Those are really important. Communication is really a very, very important element in the process and for the process to work. And the communication should work within the process, but also towards the public. What is being proofed, which themes are being proofed, how the process is working. So the outcome of the rural proofing has mainly been policy brief documents, and so the documentation and the reports are also very important. Now, just a quick look at a case example, what the rural proofing can be at the local government reorganization at the local level. Now, the new municipalities in Finland after municipal mergers are often very large and consists of different types of areas, urban as well as rural areas, different kinds of rural areas. And usually when in the case of municipal mergers, when rural proofing, the process has been made, the checklists and the participative workshops have been made, these are the three themes that they usually come up. So how to ensure that the areas are developed equally, how to ensure that democracy, that people in rural areas are heard and have the opportunity to participate in society. This is a very important question when it comes to the digital society. And then how to ensure accessibility to public services. And here is also where the geographical information is very helpful as a tool for rural proofing, because you can visualize, for instance, the access to public service. And if we go to the case example of the process of rural proofing at the regional level, this is kind of what the process looks like. So at the regional level, you would set up a group of experts, and then the process starts, and the expert group takes their expertise and helps with the documentation, the selection of evaluated themes, and the revision of the question set. But as in rural proofing, the communication is really very, very vital for the information to be public and for everyone to know what is the result of the rural proofing. This is very, very important. And now we'll look at some of the recognized strengths and weaknesses of the method within the Finnish context. And the strengths are that this is an adaptable method. It doesn't have to be used the same way in every single context of rural proofing. You can use these elements that were shown earlier and adapt them to the process, the ongoing process. The rural proofing method has really raised awareness of rural issues, and it can be, even though some of the results aren't used, for instance, in a municipal merger, but they can be used afterwards in other and further developmental work. And also the process improves cooperation between and among actors, and so between actors within the third sector and the private sector and the public sector. And also it enhances place-based policy and development. Now, weaknesses, as they can be seen, is the voluntariness of the method. So it has not yet been mainstreamed, or it is yet to be mainstreamed. It is used in some regions within regional strategic planning, for instance, or program planning, but it is not yet mainstreamed. It is also resource demanding. So if you really want to go through the whole process with participative workshops, resources are very important. And there has to be someone that takes charge of the process. So this willingness to take charge of the process, since it is voluntary, is important. And also, rural proofing is one of many impact assessments, and so it is not a priority yet. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the Interministerial Working Group that is developing the method now for legislative drafting. And this is really a very important work that is done together with the legislative drafters so that it can be used within that process. And as legislation is drafted through different kinds of processes, we're now looking at what is a good way of bringing rural proofing into that process. So we have discussions and dialogues between rural drafters and ourselves. So now this spring it will become part of the new guidance on the impact assessment of government legislative proposals in this year. And now we at the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, we are making investments in raising awareness and training of legislative drafters, but also legislators, but legislative drafters within the central government. And the Rural Policy Council and the Rural Policy Networks, as well as the Island Committee, they have a really central role in the process of supporting rural proofing, of raising awareness and knowledge, producing information, research and through research and development financing and processes. So thank you for your attention. And of course, at any time, I will be happy to share more about the rural policy and the Rural Policy Council, and also the rural proofing method in Finland. So for more information, please email. Thank you very much.